So today's podcast is brought to you by BNC Storage. They have over 21 locations across Syracuse. They have every kind of storage you can think of. I imagine you've seen their signs as you're driving around doing what you do, Mike. Is that fair?
100%. Every time I see one of their facilities, it's clean, it's professional, it's aesthetically pleasing. I've been a client of theirs. I've felt it from the customer side.
What were you using the storage for?
So a nonprofit group I'm involved with, JD Youth Athletics, we rent a storage unit from BNC. It holds all of our lacrosse gear for our lacrosse events in the summertime. So it houses all that gear, 8-9 months out of the year.
Full transparency, I had no idea that I didn't even realize that you were a customer, so that makes it even better. So I love it. So my experience with BNC is a little bit different. As you know, I'm in the storage business. It started with my dad back in 1998. He put this little storage business up outside of the Utica market. Fast forward 15, 20 years, my wife and I were looking to get invested and involved further into storage and building something. So I wanted to look for a mentor to kind of pick their brain to see how to do that. Everywhere I looked for 20 years previous, driving around, building my business, I saw these beautifully landscaped and manicured storage facilities, and the sign in front of all of them always was BNC Storage. I liked the fact that it wasn't some huge conglomerate, some REIT. It was a personally owned business. Reached out to the number on the sign, and this guy named Bruce Pollock answered the phone. Fast forward again, he sat down, had a cup of coffee with me, and every time I had a question for him, I could pick up the phone, and he was just that kind of guy who would invest back into somebody else because someone had done that for him. And now I kind of do the same thing. If someone's building a storage facility or wants to develop something, or they're just getting into it and they reach out to me, I look at it like corporate karma, and I do the same thing back and invest back in those people because I think that's how that works. So I have nothing but praise for who Bruce is and the product that he has and the person that he is. And I think, in their slogan, safe, secure, and nearby, but also I think when you're storing your belongings, trust is everything. And a guy like Bruce is where it's at for me in terms of if I was going to store something myself, and it sounds like you are, and I think it translates over to that.
Well, we're excited to have a sponsor and have it be a friend like Bruce that's really diving in with us. That's awesome.
So at the end of the day, if you're looking for storage, any kind of storage, indoor, outdoor, climate control, drive up, boat and RV, Bruce and the team at BNC Storage have you covered. We appreciate them so much for supporting us in our effort to make the city just a little bit smaller. And with that, we bring you Making the City Smaller with Joe Gehm. Thanks for watching.
Look at that setting. I want to be with you right now.
My wife was making fun of me. I was like, I don't want to start a fire. She's like, you got to start a fire.
I love it.
Morgan should join us.
She is at the hotel having an afternoon drink. I kicked her out of the house.
Is that the one at the end of the lake, like where the dam goes across?
Yeah, the old Adirondack Hotel with that big rock in front of it.
Yeah. So Mike, I don't know if you know the Long Lake area, but there's a place where the lake gets narrow and it kind of there's one end it's to the north, right, Joe? One end to the south on each side of the bridge on 28?
Yeah.
That bridge used to be a floating log bridge. I'm not sure how long it went into the time frame of whether it was cars or not, but I know at least horse and carriage went across on a floating bridge for some time before they made the bridge go at an angle up from crossing one side to the other. So
I've taken one seaplane ride in my entire life, and it was on Long Lake. It was the same summer. You guys I'm sure you were born, but you were probably babies. There was an earthquake. This is probably in the early 80s, and we were camping. I was on a trip with another family, and we were staying near Long Lake, close to, how far is Blue Mountain?
10 miles.
Yeah, so we woke up that morning to rumbling. So that was probably one of my first earthquake memories.
Really?
Yep. And then we took the seaplane ride at one point during that week. That was pretty awesome. I was probably 8 or 9 years old.
That's wild.
Joe, we started this podcast, I'm putting in quotation marks, by accident in 2020 in a world that was imperfect. So we have followed that suit up to and including your call last time, which by far, Mike will attest to this, was the biggest disaster we've ever had with technological problems, but we're embracing it. We're going to run with it, and we're glad that you were patient and worked with us to get to where we are today, and we're happy that you've joined us. So because of the fact that we take blessings out of curses. That's at least how I look at things. I got a chance to hear a little bit more about your story from some of the stuff you shared with us the last time. It gave me another opportunity to look at things at a different perspective. So I'm charged up and ready. But I want to start with the story of Mike. If you could kind of share the story of how you came to know about this guy named Joe Gehm.
Absolutely. Joe and I have talked about this before. We're not quite certain the exact moment we met, but I'm going to chalk it up to being on the roof of the Addis building. You were just getting started, the redevelopment of that historic building in downtown Syracuse. And we walk into that building, and it was, with all due respect, it was a disaster at that moment. There was vision, but there was no physical work yet. And then he took me up on the roof. And then anytime you're in a building and the property owner says, "Hey, you want to go on the roof?" You're like, absolutely. Because you get to your point, Pete, you get a perspective, or a different perspective. We get out of this building that's ripped apart, and the roof was new, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
Joe had just kind of shared his vision of what they were going to create, and that was market rate apartments at the time. I think that's where they ended up. But I remember laughing because I think he probably spent more time bending over and picking up nails that the roofers left behind. We'd be chatting, and next thing you know, he's bent down and he's grabbing another nail before this brand new beautiful roof got punctured unintentionally. But that's really when I met Joe and could see that he had the vision to be a developer. You got to have vision first and foremost, and then you got to have patience, and you got to have some equity partners. And I say that with a grin, but he certainly has the vision, and what you've done since just solidifies my immediate reaction was he's got it. He's got the vision. So I'm going to stick with that as our story of when we met. I was a real estate broker at the time. So with that all said, Joe, Pete and I, we welcome you to Making the City Smaller, and we're excited to hear your story.
Awesome. Thank you both for having me.
If you could just give me a quick kind of essentially of like who you are, where you came from, and what you do in the way of a career, if that makes sense.
Sure, absolutely. So Joe Gehm, I'm the founder of LAHINCH Group Real Estate and Development. Born and raised in Syracuse, New York. We currently focus on mixed-use redevelopment, historic rehab buildings in the Syracuse, Rochester, Utica market, and soon to be up in Tupper Lake, hence why I'm up in the Adirondacks right now. I had some meetings up in Tupper today. I have a true passion for historic preservation, telling the stories of the buildings that we rehab, and really communicating that past and the presence of folks living and working in these buildings. It's pretty fun.
One of our last conversations, you talked about growing up in Eastwood, which I just think Eastwood's one of the coolest neighborhoods. When I moved to Syracuse 20-something years ago, that's where I found myself.
Eastwood was a great area to grow up in. I grew up on Shotwell Park. It's got the center median. We'd play football and baseball out there. My mom's family is from Syracuse originally, big Italian family. She's 100% Italian. And then you got my father's family, who's originally from Binghamton area, Whitney Point. So growing up in Syracuse, and still today, I'm fortunate enough, my mother's mother, my grandmother, is still alive. She's 92. And, just hearing the stories from her firsthand today, even about her growing up in Syracuse when South Salina Street was, bustling. And it was, if you dress up to go downtown and you'd walk to the shops, take a quick circle back to the Addis building. Like, my grandmother got her wedding gown at the Addis building in 1952. I've yet to get her down there since we've redeveloped it, but we've talked about it. I really want to get her down there. So, understanding the past, the history of Syracuse into when I grew up, in the 90s, but to see what Syracuse has become, especially downtown Syracuse and the redevelopment, and still there's so much opportunity. It's exciting. It's exciting to come back home to Syracuse and play a role in that.
And you've expressed an interest before too, that the historical piece, and I think it's funny because it seems like you can't help but go back. And that story about your grandmother, that's where my excitement, that's where my goosebumps literally come into play when you can connect a dot back. So you talked a little bit about your mom and dad, and something that I wanted to capture that we may have missed in other situations, but what did life look like at home in terms of what they did for a living and how it affected who you guys were and how you came to where you are today?
Sure. So my dad's background, he's an accountant. He's a CFO for a couple of businesses locally. growing up, my mom was a nurse. She would work, the midnight shift till 6, 7 in the morning, then come home, get us on the bus, and, cook dinner every night. So it was, growing up middle-class family, both parents worked, put us through college. I have 2 siblings. My older brother, Brian, who's 42, he lives locally. He's got 3 kids. And my sister, Elisa, she's 41. She lives locally as well with 3 kids. So very close-knit family. Always grew up playing sports. So our life was, always outside. Our parents would kick us out of the house, go, we'll call you in for dinner. And then just always traveling for sports. Sports was a big part of my life, big part of my family's life. And, it's fun to now see our kids growing up and trying to, I don't want to push them into it, but they enjoy sports, and it's just fun to see everything come full circle. So our daughter is 8 and our son is 6. And then my wife, Morgan, I won't say her age, but she's a year or 2 older than I am.
That's safe. I like that. The thing that sticks out in my brain from what you just said, right? Your mom, you said she worked from, what were her hours?
If I remember, I want to say she went in like 11 or 12, 11 at night or midnight. Because I remember she would put us in bed, and then she would go to work, and she would get home, and then, get us all ready for school and sleep during the day, I guess. Again, this was probably 30 years ago.
I like how you're doing the math, because you're doing the same thing I did. Like, she was working those kind of hours, doing the things that she was doing. I think you better spend some time and tell your mom how much you appreciate her.
I do, and both of my parents and my in-laws too. Both of my in-laws live locally. Listen, we could not be more fortunate to have, all 4 of our parents around, especially for the grandkids. I can't fathom. I have a lot of buddies who are still out of town, and, raising kids without having the grandparents around to help, I can't fathom. And it's pretty cool though, because our kids, all the grandkids, are so close with our parents, and I think that's probably most rewarding for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was with a local architect today for lunch, and we were chatting, catching up, and he's like, I told you I'm a grandfather, right? Immediately he pulls out his phone, and he's looking for the picture of his grandson, and beautiful baby boy. And then he showed me the next picture. It was I think it was his mother, who's 89, holding his, so that's her great grandson.
Yep.
And the fact that she's around to see not only her grandkids, but now great grandkids. And I mean, we don't have that luxury at the Durkin household, but fantastic, that generational and that, and I'm like, so what's it like to be a grandfather? And
I like to listen in on those conversations. My grandmother's 96, and to hear her speaking to my daughter who's 16, it's cool if you can get them to be talking where they don't know you're watching or listening, and kind of just see what that looks like and feels like. So, I mean, a kid that's constantly got thumbs moving on a screen with a woman who, doesn't even understand the principles behind that, but to hear them find synergies in conversation and relate to one another, one of the coolest things I think you get to see as a human, if that makes sense. So,
yeah, that's really neat.
Mike and I had this idea, Joe, about doing something in the bucket of a historical podcast episode. We wanted to dig back into just kind of like what you were saying earlier about going backwards in time to look at the business community, find a building, find a business, talk about where it started, where it had come, and then maybe profile some different guests that had businesses in that building, so on and so forth. Mike said to me, I got the perfect guy. He sent an email to you. Your response back was, hey, we saw an episode, or I saw an episode with Troy Evans, who's another real estate guy. I really loved the episode. So fast forward, you and I grab a cup of coffee at Freedom Espresso. Joe is like Norm from Cheers. He walks in, they already have his coffee ready for him. They know when he's going to be, he's got parking up front. There's a valet guy that's escorting him in the whole night. I'm joking, but he definitely spent some time there, which I like, because it shows me that you're rooted in the communities that are around and supporting the people that are in your buildings. It makes you, in my opinion, relative to the community and being able to build rapport in that regard. Anyhow, my point, I have one. While we're sitting there talking and discussing all the potential of putting something together from a historical point, you toured me through that Franklin Square property tell the audience a little bit about that property, if you would.
Yeah. So just to connect those dots, as Pete was saying, Troy Evans and Dan Kramer rehabbed the old VANDERKAMP up on the North Shore. Did an awesome job. I have yet to get up there, but that family, the Sewell family, it was their summer camp at the turn of the century, 120 years ago. And they own Merrill Sewell Products, which, Mike, as you know, the building that we did in Franklin Square, Pete and I are sitting outside at Freedom of Espresso, and I'm pointing to them, saying that's the same building that the Sewell family, owned 100 and something years ago. And it was just this full circle, the city being so small. It just blows my mind that family, Troy and Dan did an awesome job up there. We rehabbed this building to, apartments now, and there's the rock climbing gym is in there, and there's a handful of commercial tenants. So it all comes full circle, and it's just really cool what they've done and what we've done, in the Franklin Square area.
Love your modesty, Joe. Mike, the climbing facility, I think you've seen it. Amazing place. What I think is interesting about this conversation is a lot of times you ask somebody, how'd you get into an industry, right? There's the there's a cookie cutter route. I went to school. I pursued this one degree. It put me on a path where I met somebody that changed that path. Will you explain how rock climbing led to your path to real estate?
So I graduated Lemoyne with an accounting degree. I was in public accounting for a little while here in Syracuse with Danable McKee. And then I went down to Houston to visit my uncle on vacation. And, he's like, listen, I really want you to take an interview while you're here. And I'm like, Patrick, I don't have any clothes for an interview. He's like, I got a client downtown Houston, borrow my suit. I got it all set up. So I go down there and literally just walked into this, did some research on the company. It was Huron Consulting Group. It was a spinoff of Arthur Andersen in the mid to late 2000s. And long and short is I got a job offer while I was visiting him and came back home, and I'm like, you know what? I've never left Syracuse for an extended period of time, packed my car and drove to Houston, Texas. And it was the best decision of my life. Spent the next 3+ years literally living out of my suitcase, traveling the country for work and then the world for leisure. I was 23, 24 years old. And at that time, my brother had just gotten married to his wife, Carrie. And I told him, I was like, listen, when you guys have your first child, I'll make a promise, I'll move back home. They got pregnant. I was living in DC, working for the same company. And I was like, you know what? Time to stop this travel thing. I'm going to move back home. And I immediately, after like 6 months, I'm like, Jesus, I'm living in all these big cities and I'm back in Syracuse. And I wasn't happy. I really wanted to get out. But at the time I was back home, my sister-in-law, Carrie's like, listen, I got a girl I want you to meet. You might remember her, this crazy redhead, Morgan Hartley from Eastwood. And I was like, Morgan Hartley? I remember that name. She's like, she used to play hoops with your brother, Brian, at EYP at Blessed Sacrament Church on Saturday morning. So literally when I was 5 or 6 years old, my father coached now my wife, Morgan, Saturday morning hoops with my brother, Brian. So full circle, her and I started dating, and we hit it off. I'll never forget this. We were on a date one night down at Gentili's. You remember Gentili's, Kevin Gentili's original place on Burnett? Best restaurant around. That was our spot. So come home, and I was like, Morgan, I've always wanted to start my own business. And we're throwing ideas against the wall. We're sitting in the car for an hour. And this idea of some fitness center came about. I think a couple weeks later, I was talking to my Uncle Joe. Uncle Joe used to run all the fitness and recreational facilities for Syracuse University. He's like, listen, cool idea, but whatever you do, maybe you put a rock climbing wall in that gym. And I'm like, rock climbing? Knew nothing about rock climbing. He said, there's this group out of Colorado, El Dorado Climbing Walls. They contact me every year for 10 years. Put a climbing wall in SU, and they're like, never gonna happen. But he said, I think they do some consulting program on how to start climbing gyms. So the first meeting I ever had on this was down at the Freedom of Espresso on Waltman. And it was with Rob Simpson, who had just moved back from DC2, I believe, and Ben Walsh. Ben Ben was the head of neighborhood and business development. I'm like, guys, I have this idea, but I know nothing about it. What do I do? And Rob immediately was like, I'm a rock climber. Awesome idea. I think you should pursue this. And that was the start of my journey. I ended up flying out to Colorado with Morgan as my girlfriend, proposed to her, and we met this company. And the vice president or the president of the company he went to SU, and we hit it off. And he's like, this is the Northeast untapped market, Syracuse, New York. And I was like, something went off in my head. I got to figure out how to do this. This is my way to start a business. And it was a 7-year journey. And so Pete, how I got into real estate was wrote my business plan, quit my job, tried to fundraise for a year, met, I think 100 investors throughout Syracuse. Not one person gave me $1. And I just was so persistent, but I was looking at all these properties and I toured every vacant building in central New York. And then that got me into an investment opportunity with our first project. Luke Esposito brought me into 538 Erie Boulevard West. And as an investor, partner, and then just fell in love with it. And after so many steps backwards on the climbing project, deals falling through, hurdles with everything you can imagine, I connected with these two brothers, Ed and Joe Hardy out of Boston. And they came to Syracuse. I begged them to come to Syracuse. I was like, can you just hear my story, see the city? After working with them for 2 years, we inked a deal with Kemper, Matt, Jr. and Sr. at the Merrill Sewell building. And after 7 years, we opened a gym in Syracuse, opened one in Rochester, opened one in Buffalo. And then I said, guys, this is awesome. This was my dream, but I wanted to get into real estate. So, you know, we actually still talk quite a bit. We're working on some other deals together, more from a development standpoint for me. But that's how I got into real estate. And it was this long journey with a climbing gym that now all of a sudden we rehabbed the gym we opened it in.
Wow. So wait, were you an owner of the gym?
So that's a great question. Originally, that was the plan, Mike, is I would be an owner, but as I got more and more into it, they had a whole investment team. And I said, listen, let me act as an investor, a broker, you know, make some money that way, which would help me, you know, launch my own business. So I opted for no ownership in the end. We opened the 3 gyms. We're looking at some other gyms together right now. And Ed and Joe, let me tell you, they're my age. They're incredible. They are the largest gym operator in the United States right now. And what they've done is it's pretty impressive. So all their gyms are, let's say 80% rock climbing, and then they got a fitness facility, yoga, they have personal training, but the center being rock climbing.
When I take notes from our conversations or time, I always kind of pull out key things that someone says. And you at some point said 7 years of no's. And I thought that was a good title for the chapter of that part of your story.
It was very emotional. You know, when I talk about it, I don't think about it anymore because once you're out of it, you tend to forget, you know, the path you took. But and it wasn't just me; it was Morgan. You know, we were getting married. I didn't have a job. We sunk every dollar we had into this concept that everybody was like, "You're crazy, you're crazy." But everybody who told me no, I was like, "I'm going to prove them wrong." I mean, that's my nature. You know, the competitive side of me. And, you know, we got it done, and there was a lot of tears. First 2 people I messaged the day we signed the lease, Rob Simpson and Ben Walsh. Again, coming full circle, it's amazing. They're doing so well. They just expanded another 9,000 square feet. They take almost 26,000 square feet in our building right now. It's really cool to see what they've done for Franklin Square, but really the city of Syracuse and the community.
But think about the lessons that you pulled from those 7 years that you didn't even know at the time, right? You went to Lemoyne, you spent your time, you know, borrowing your uncle's suit to get that role, that gig, where you probably learned a ton of things. But man, nothing teaches you like grinding through people telling you to get lost. Right? That's just like,
yeah, yeah, you learned a lot. And I always joke, you know, Morgan and I, when we do talk about this, I tell her that 1 year where I quit my job and I was literally just networking and meeting a lot of people that I deal with now, that 1 year to me was me getting my MBA and, every other, acronym you want beside your name. And I learned so much. And I learned, really, for me, it was who's who, like who are the players in Central New York, who gets things done, how does the city work, how does the county work? I mean, those are things that and still I learn every day something new, doing projects and doing deals across upstate. But it was tough. It was very emotional, but you know what, at the end of the day, entrepreneurs, it's a different breed of people who, I don't see the hurdles ahead of me. I see the end product. I don't know how I'm going to get there, but it's just constantly thinking in my head, manifesting that energy. I'm going to get it done.
Yeah. And it helps when you've spent that time and you have those people that you made those connections with, you built that rapport with. So when you have to reach out to the Ben Walsh or to the Rob Simpson, that makes that to me, that's not the play on the whole making the city smaller thing, but, how do you create synergies within an area, a market, so that it feels smaller, so when you move, you're more nimble and able to get to the goal that you want to get to in a more efficient fashion. It's a mic drop moment for what you just said. If you were trying to market making the city smaller for us, thank you for doing that. You just did it all in one paragraph.
How much money were you asking for? Tens of thousands, like to individuals? I mean, when you were getting 100 no's.
Yeah, I think, Mike, I was looking for like $50,000 a person and trying to raise probably maybe $1 million. You know what? If you're gonna put highlight photos up during this podcast, I still have the original business plan. I'll have to give you a little snapshot of that.
Like it.
Absolutely. It's it's similar to the Troy Evans story where he had 100 cups of coffee for like a year straight, or 300 cups of coffee. He was just out there just trying to figure out where he was headed, and he took someone the coffee, on a daily basis, if not multiple times.
And similar kind of scenario too. He had sold some property where he had a windfall, and he was like, I gotta figure out what my next step is, and he put himself at the tech garden. Yep. And just surrounded himself with like-minded people. I imagine you know Troy personally, correct?
I've met Troy a handful of times, and I would consider him a friend. One of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. Very down to earth, and as a developer, no ego. What he's done with Common Space is unbelievable. From a financial end, and I don't know his financials, but when you talk to banks and other people who look at the co-working concept and see what Troy's done and what he's able to achieve for his office space, it's awesome. And for the downtown market to have him, I think we're all fortunate that Troy Evans is, investing in Central New York.
Yeah, good human being on top of a good business person. And to think that it all started with a single wide mobile home bought for like less than $1,000.
Crazy.
I love
the
it.
American dream, baby.
That's the best story, man. I probably use that more than I should, but I always give him credit. So we went a little technical, talking about some of the things you've done in your career. My question is, where do some of your personal passions intersect with your professional passion?
Again, growing up, it was all sports. My life was baseball, basketball, and then, I really took that passion and put it into my work. I don't play hoops anymore. I golf when I can, and I enjoy golfing. My passion is my family. It's doing things with my wife and kids, first and foremost, my parents, my siblings, my friends, the Adirondacks, being up here. We're incredibly fortunate. So I'm up in Long Lake, New York. We have an investment property up here, which we rent out all summer. And then, in the holidays and on the off times, my family and I use it to escape. And to me, there's no more beautiful place than the Adirondacks and truly Long Lake. So anywhere within the blue line, I love. We have an upcoming project in Tupper Lake, which is 20 miles north of here. It's a massive redevelopment project, historic rehab project that we're undertaking with Housing Visions and Hubert Brewer. This has been 3 years in the making. So once that project kicks off, I'm hoping to spend a lot more time up here.
The property that you're in, how old is that established, like that building itself?
So the main house here was built in 2010, but the property dates back to the early 1900s. So I'll give you a quick little history on this place. So
You do.
we ended up closing on this a week before COVID hit. And after we closed on it, I did some digging, researching on what the history of this property was. And so you got a main house and a garage that was built, 12 years ago, whatever. But there's a cottage on the water from the early 1900s. And the more I researched, this was a kids camp for boys and girls in the 1920s. And it was run by the BEATTIE family out of Long Island. Researched the BEATTIE family, found on Long Lake's Historical Society webpage that there was a pamphlet from the 1920s, and Robert Beattie, who founded this camp, was the standout at Princeton, right? And then he played in the NFL for 1 year. And I started reading about this guy. Invented the Beattie jet lighter. I was like, holy crap, this is so cool. We're on this property and learning about it. Well, I found his obituary, Googling, and it mentioned a daughter. And I searched the daughter's name, and after literally like a few weeks of searching, I ended up finding her son down in North Carolina. And I sent this LinkedIn message, said, hey, so random, but are you related to Robert Beattie? He said, yes. Can I help you? Well, let me tell you guys, this whole thing came around. She's in her late 80s. Her and I connected one day, and I had tears in my eyes. She had to sell this property, and it broke her. And she said, every day for the last 40 years, I cry because I had to sell my family's property. And I did a FaceTime with her, and she's crying. She's telling me where they used to have the horses stable up here. I showed her the cottage. She sent me pictures of her being a baby on our beach here, 85 years ago. And so this whole thing comes full circle. There's cabins up on the hill that are dilapidated, and we found the cabin as she was a kid that she used to stay in the summers. And it's just, so the history here, again, everything happens for a reason, in my opinion. The history of this property is incredible. And, we're hoping to tell our story up in Tupper Lake and continue to make some memories here in Long Lake.
Man, I want to stay on this part of the story, but we got some other places we got to go. But that gives me goosebumps. Like that just to be able to draw the lines back to somebody with that level of emotion associated with a property. I want to hear her story at some point.
I know we got to get her on Zoom and record it for sure.
Yeah, I think that'd be awesome. All right, so I'm so happy that you went where you did. I set you up to see where you'd go. I knew Passions and Long Lake were going to overlap somewhere, so it worked out. I rolled the dice pretty well on that one, so I'm proud of myself over here. It doesn't take much. So current affairs, current projects. I know you got a lot of different stuff going on, a lot of different markets. I'm living north of the Utica market. I feel there's a huge energy coming out of Utica. I know you have some stuff there. You mentioned Tupper Lake. I know you also have some stuff in the Syracuse market that's kind of coming to fruition. Sure. If you'd share a little bit about maybe Utica, and then maybe take us a ride down the thruway to what you have happening over in the Syracuse market, Joe.
Yeah. So I'll start in Utica. So we just wrapped up two pretty large projects in Utica. The Utica Travelers building, it's right as you come over the bridge on Genesee Street. We did 32 apartments there. Barton and LaJudas opened an office with us. And then the Utica Observer Dispatch has an office in our building. So that building's pretty much full. Our second project there, the Utica Steam Cotton Factory, 600 State Street. We put 64 apartments in there. Brooklyn Pickle's going to open their location there in about 6 weeks, I think. That's right across from the Mohawk Valley Health System, the new hospital going downtown. We just purchased a group of buildings on Hotel Street. So we're partnering with Charlie and Andy Brewer. So that's going to kick off this summer. That's going to be about 70 units. And then we got a first floor Syracuse-based restaurant group. I won't say who yet, coming in that market.
So you won't say the name of the restaurant, but would you give me maybe what kind of food they serve, or is that too? Is that gonna say who it is for sure?
I think you would know. We haven't hit the deal, but we're 99% there. And once it happens, I will gladly share it.
All right, fair enough.
We're doing another project in Utica with BBL Construction, who we've partnered on a handful of projects with. They've been awesome to work with. The old Mayrow building on Genesee Street. Real quick on Tupper Lake, the old Ovalwood Dish Factory. You're coming in 3 to go up to Lake Placid from 81. Everybody's driven past it. It's got the 260-foot smokestack. been working on this project forever, and we're almost there. So again, it's LAHINCH Group, Huber Brewer, Charlie and I really dug into this one 3 years ago in Housing Visions. Chris, Ben, Diana, they've been awesome to work with. We're doing 80 workforce apartments, and then we're bringing Racket River Brewery over, and they're going to open a 20,000 square foot production facility there. And we're hoping to get a shovel in the ground later this year for Tupper. We are halfway through a historic rehab in Rochester. So we're doing the old L. Winger Berry building next to City Hall. It's a 64 apartments, ground floor retail commercial. Again, partner with Andy and Charlie on that one. Huber Brewer, and then swinging back to Cuse, we are wrapping up the Middle Ages building. We call it the Middle Ages building. It was the former General Ice Cream Factory. So Middle Ages is doing a really cool expansion right now, and they're going to be done, I think, about 3 weeks. They're doing a really cool event space above their tap room. So yeah, I mean, it's a cool site. So we got Middle Ages in there, D&D Motors. Salt City Coffee is opening a roastery, not a cafe. Their roasting operations, we're going to be building that out. And then we got about 12 or 13,000 square feet of space we're trying to market. You know, it's walkable to downtown. We got about an 80-car parking lot. You know, that neighborhood, Leavenworth, it's awesome. The Dietz, you know, Matt Paulus and Huber Brewer did an awesome job at the Dietz. We did 538 Erie. You got the Five Sisters right there on the park. It's a pretty cool neighborhood.
When we were talking about historical podcast episodes and drawing lines back, Joe had shared with me, I would say, a marketing brochure kind of detailing what that building looked like for the Syracuse home of Frojoy ice cream back in the early 1900s, right, Joe?
Yeah. Frojoy was there. If you walk in, if you remember Middle Ages old tap room, when you'd walk in the doors and go to the left, and it still had the Frojoy logo up there, and it's still there. The General Ice Cream Factory was built in the 30s. It's kind of got this Art Deco style similar to the National Grid building. You know, for many years it was operated as an ice cream factory. Middle Ages now has been in there for like 26, 27 years, I want to say.
Has it been that long? Oh my God.
It's been that long. It's great. I mean, it's wild. Again, their expansion space is going to be about 7,000 square feet, beautiful vaulted ceilings. They're going to do concerts, weddings, you know, tasting area upstairs. Originally, Pete, we were going to do about 13 apartments above the brewing operation area, but with, you know, inflation, construction costs, it just doesn't make sense financially. So we're trying to land a commercial office tenant who wants to be right above a brewery where we can run some tap lines into their employee cafe and maybe have a little rooftop deck to overlook the city.
Yeah, I think that if you find the right group, that'd probably be something that would be attractive to them. Some of the reading I did on it, and this is, again, I am a history nerd. I'm not afraid to say it. So in later years, I know Seal Test was a company that was big associated with ice cream in the Syracuse market. They were housed in the facility, and they were kind of the governing body to make sure that the ice cream was safe for consumption, that they were looking at it and testing it. And I just thought that it was kind of funny that, you know, the company that's producing ice cream is literally handing it off to the company that's housed in their corporate facility to make sure it's up to standard. They had a guy that was there or an employee that was there all the time associated with that, and I just thought it was maybe a little bit of an underhand pitch.
Wouldn't you like that job, that you have to test all this? I mean, between that and then maybe you got to go test all the beer from Middle Ages to make sure it's drinkable.
Sign me up.
There you go. Mike Jerkins' retirement job. I love it. Seems like there's a pretty cool community there, not only from a residential and like a real communal feel with, you know, redevelopment in the park. The park is beautiful, but also I think there's, you know, like you've done some other buildings in that space. If I was a chess player and if I was a real estate guy, I probably could draw some lines that say you're kind of creating a pretty strategic playing field or board for yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So the CG Meeker building is, 100 feet away from Middle Ages. So yeah, I mean, I think that neighborhood has so much potential. Between Dietz, our building, there's, probably 140 apartments right there. And then some of the houses that have been fixed up on Park Ave there. The Park Ave Association is fantastic. I mean, they're always out in the park planting flowers, decorating around the holidays. So there's a lot of opportunity there, and I just think it's a unique piece of property with the Middle Ages building.
So I'm a self-storage guy, right? I gotta be honest. That's kind of where my eyes kind of go to wherever I see doors. When I'm driving down the road, my kids and my wife will make fun of me because I'm, calling out storage facilities as we travel. That's, one of the exciting things that you have to do when you're riding with me. So I couldn't help but notice at some point the B&C Storage, who I feel really passionate about, Bruce and his team are amazing. I see that their signage is there. Again, from a community perspective, or drawing people in and having amenities and things that can help to offset whether they're moving their corporate space or whether they're living and they need that extra storage space. So it seems like there's a good dynamic there with the different offerings and entertainment. And I know that you mentioned there's a music festival that takes place as well. So it seems like it's all gelling well and coming full circle, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the neighborhood, the proximity to downtown, 690, 81, it's right there. B&C's done a great job in less than a year cleaning up that building. I think for the right tenant, the right opportunity, we'll land somebody for our vacant space. And again, it's going to make, whoever comes in, there's going to make a great impact on the neighborhood.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, and the West Street corridor, when that's improved after the 81 redevelopment, that's going to clean up that whole, I guess that's the eastern end of Leavenworth.
Yes.
So, Joe, you've done an amazing job of going backwards. We heard a lot of really cool details about what led you to be the person that sits in front of us. It explains a lot. We like and love who you are as a person from what we've seen of you, and now it all kind of comes full circle. We understand the background, your family dynamic. You've got some crazy uncles that are willing to do some really out of the box type of things to get you moving, and hopefully you can do the same to the future generations of your family. So thank you for sharing all the past and the present. But my favorite question always for people and guys and gals like yourself is, what's next?
That's a great question. What is next for me? I want to continue to grow. I'm trying to build a foundation for LAHINCH Group to allow me to focus more on development. So we do brokerage, property management. We have a small team, but I'm trying to build that foundation, which my team will help me grow from the day to day. I feel like my value for my partners and all these projects we're in is finding these buildings, putting together deals. That's the fun part for me. I want to look at other investment opportunities, diversify our portfolio, maybe do more value add, ground up. I mean, we're looking at some ground up opportunities now with Micron coming to town, and everybody's, there's going to be a housing need in Central New York. So, we're always looking at other opportunities, but for me, just keeping my head, focused on what's right in front of me, executing, getting things done. Sky's the limit. I truly feel like you got to set your goals and truly set goals. Set your goals and set them high. And that's the way I always did it in sports. And, in my personal life and business, I hope there's many more years of great things to come.
I only had one question I wrote down. LAHINCH. What is that? What's the name derived from?
So LAHINCH is a seaside town in Western Ireland that my wife has family in Ennis, County Clare. So we visited her family pre-kid, so 9 years ago now. And we are walking in LAHINCH. It's a beach town, surf town actually. And we are walking, we're literally the only car in the parking lot besides one other car. And we walk over to this truck and it says Hartley's Seafood. And Hartley is my wife's maiden name and now our daughter's name. And so it just stuck. I was like, LAHINCH, what a cool name. And there's a beautiful golf course, world famous golf course that I've yet to play that I would like to go back someday and play.
Thank you. I always wondered where you came up with that name.
Yeah.
God damn it, Mike Durkin. That was the best question of the whole show. It was the simplest question. It's one I was curious of at first. I'm being really honest and vulnerable here. I think the first time I walked a building with you, Joe, I was embarrassed. I didn't really know exactly how to say it, and I didn't want to botch it. And it was one of those things where, like, I didn't know if it was a commercial real estate terminology that was going to be the dope in the room that didn't know or something. And Mike Durkin, in the last minute, pulls up the 3-pointer and asks the
That's a
simple.
baby, Mike.
I love that it dots back to your wife and her heritage. Mike, can't you ask these things a little sooner? So one other item I want to hit, and it's not really particular to Joe, but maybe it is on some level. It's in your community, in your neighborhood. There's businesses and things happening. Mike Durkin, could you let us know where you're recording from today by chance?
Oh, I appreciate that. We've lost the exposed brick of One Webster's Landing. We are transitioning. We, as in VIP, is moving into the Post this week, which is the redevelopment of the Post Standard. So I'm in my new office. And this morning, Joe, you'd appreciate this because you know the building, I think. So it's snowing like gangbusters this morning, and there's a lot of folks on vacation this week traveling, and it's like a snow globe. And I snap a shot and I send it to Meg, and I'm like, you are gonna lose your mind when you walk in here Monday, because we probably have 20% of the people now.
Okay.
There's still, the other 80 have to come next week or the next 3 weeks, but we're up and running, and I'm in my new office.
Congrats. That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
I cannot wait to see your guys' new office.
NBT is moving in the summertime, and studs are up. It's
That's
going
awesome.
fast.
Who else is in there, Mike?
VIP is moving into the first floor as we speak. Chase Design moved in last summer, so summer of 22. NBT Bank will be bringing in their Central New York headquarter folks from a different location downtown. And NRG Energy signed a lease recently, and they'll be bringing another dozen people with them in the fall of 23. And now we're working on phase 2, which is the remaining 100,000 feet that the newspaper vacated in December.
That's awesome.
So, Joe, I'll tell you this one more story. If you're standing in the Post and you're at the north end, we've got the wall of glass, which is the old press hall. And it's 50 feet tall, it's 40 feet deep, it's 130 feet wide. And we've been talking to all sorts of different companies, whether they're assembly, they're making widgets, they're health and fitness, they're you name it, defense, security. I mean, all these different things. What do you do with this area that's all glass and 50 foot high? And I can't tell you how many times, but it happened this week. People are like, you got to do a rock climbing wall. And I'm not making this up. It happened this week. But yeah, if they outgrow Merrill Soul and we don't fill the north end yet, call me up.
Mike, every time I drove past that building for those 7 years, I was like, that is a climbing wall. But it wouldn't unfortunately be large enough, but that would be so. Can you imagine like 50 people climbing up 50 feet and having lights shining up there?
Yeah,
that's cool. Mike, let me say what you guys have done at the Post, and kudos to Jeremy and Gary Thurston over at City Center. I mean, to come out of COVID and not to put in apartments in a building, and for you guys to fill your space, for them to fill that building. I mean, hats off, because without that, downtown Syracuse would be, I think struggling a little bit to bring those jobs downtown. I'm happy for you guys, and I can't wait to see your space.
Rising tides lifts all boats. People ask me, and I'm like, I'm tickled pink that Hayner Hoyt pulled off City Center. I think it's fantastic that they took a section and didn't do more apartments, that there's enough commercial need. I'm like, this is great. We need to go from Salt City Market up to the north end to the Post. That's the central business district. We got to be strong every block along the way. And what's happened on Salina Street and Warren over the last 10 years is remarkable. Mm-hmm. So, we're excited, but we would love to bring a company or companies that can bring more jobs downtown, take advantage of the high power, the high ceilings, the heavy power, the floor loads, the loading docks, and let's bring some industrial type assembly jobs that can really bring dozens of more people to the heart of downtown. And quite frankly, and Joe, you know this, a lot of groups have trouble finding those workers out in the suburbs. It's hard to get to sometimes. So let's bring the jobs to them. And we're just a 9-iron away from the north side. Just let's bring some jobs right here and let them walk to work like the old days of Nettleton and the Post Standard. People would walk to work.
I think you guys can do it. You got a good product.
Yeah, thank you. And I got to put a plug in. So Matt Paulus with the Deets you mentioned him and Huber Brewer, but we VIP Architectural Associates was the architect for that project.
It's a good plug. I
like it. Joe, I appreciate your friendship and so happy that we had the opportunity or Mike took the opportunity to introduce us. I think there's a lot more for us to think about. We both seem to have a passion for the history stuff, and I want to explore that. Ultimately, we appreciate you coming on and helping us make the city smaller, and look forward to what's next for us.
So, Joe, it's fantastic to hear your story. It's fantastic that you have a fire burning behind you, this fireside chat, if you will. You do need to add some more wood on it when you hang up with us. I'm hoping Morgan had a great time at down the street. So enjoy the weekend up there and burn lots of fire and snuggle up, because Monday all the folks who took February break are back, and spring is a few weeks away, and we're all going to be really, really excited and busy here. So I know I said each time I see you, we will do a project together, Joe, and we want to build some housing ground up. Maybe that's our in.
I appreciate both of your time today and hearing my story and let me tell it to some folks. It's very humbling. So appreciate your friendship, Mike. We will absolutely do a project together, and I hope you guys enjoy the weekend. And what we should do is plan a trip up north to VANDERKAMP, because I've yet to see Troy and Dan's work. And once the snow melts and the mud dries up, let's connect with Troy and Dan and make a little trip out there.
Well, I thought you were gonna invite us to Long Lake, but I mean, whatever.
I mean, if we want to do it up, you know what? Once Tupper Lake kicks off, we'll do a Long Lake weekend, and I would love to get you guys through OWD before we start.
Yeah, I would love that.
I'm excited. I've been holding off on any other editing, knowing that I had this coming, and I'm excited. This is where my passion kicks in. So I can't wait to put this together to help bring value to what you're doing.
Thank you both.
All right.
Awesome.
Have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend, guys.